He's the founder of one of the fastest growing startups in the world. Fast Company calls it the fastest growing startup in history, and also a cultural lightning rod of sorts. It is indeed a pleasure to be joining from the Uber headquarters right here, the very, very maverick Travis Kalanick. Thanks very much for being with us. It is an absolute pleasure to be talking to you right at your headquarters.
It's good to have you.
Let's make a quick confession here. I'm a huge addict of your app.
Okay.
I keep using it all the time. But let me just first begin by talking to you about, this is super successful. You made headlines with this. But this isn't the first startup that you started off with.
Oh, no.
You come back, you come to the space with some amount of failure. Has that changed your worldview as far as starting up and Uber is concerned?
Well, look, I think I love building things. And that love, you have that love whether it's going well or whether it's not going so well. You love what you build. And yeah, I've had a couple startups in the past that either never got off the ground or sort of flew really high and then crashed. But it makes you, it brings texture to the person you are, but also how you approach it. In some ways, doing a company is kind of like you're in love, and you learn a little bit about love through these. That's right. Through these, not just the high points, but also the low points, and so it's made me good at a lot of things that it takes that you need to be good at when you're an entrepreneur. But it also makes you appreciate when things are good.
And you're appreciating a lot of success right now, and it's very good as far as Uber is concerned. The context of this meeting really is that the Indian Prime Minister, he's only the second to come here in over a 3-decade period. He's visiting the West Coast, he's going to be in the Valley, he's going to be meeting success stories like yourselves. What does this really mean as far as India is concerned, where we are seeing the startup scene buzz as well? And also in terms of the Silicon Valley, we've seen very successful stories happen out of India here. What does this visit particularly mean to you?
Look, I think, India is one of the biggest countries in the world, and for us, just a huge opportunity to serve literally over 1 billion people.
That's right.
So we're honored to have Prime Minister Modi come to the U.S., and I'm certainly honored to be part of the group of Americans that can help welcome him. And so we're excited. I can't wait, and I think there's a lot of things we'd love to tell them about our experiences in India, our experiences growing as a startup there, and things that can help the startup community in India, whether it be Bangalore, Delhi, or other cities that we're in.
It's interesting you say that, and especially I think somebody like yourself will have a lot of stories to share, because you've got a super successful story as well as stories that have not been so successful in the past to share. Just from that point of view, what will it take for a Silicon Valley like ecosystem to evolve in India?
Well, I mean, look.
What are the challenges, the enablers?
Look, I think what it really comes down to is it comes down to entrepreneurs getting the experience of building things and getting funded and growing and scaling. That experience is everything. And so I think it's starting to happen. And that's a beautiful thing. I like to say that, look, Silicon Valley is up and running as a startup ecosystem. But in many ways, I think that there are a couple burgeoning startup communities that around the world that are going to become the next Silicon Valley. I like to say it's the 3 bays. So there's the Bay Area here.
That's right.
There's Beijing, and there's Bangalore. And so in many ways, the 3 bays, I think, is where it goes in the next, over the next decade, where it's not just Silicon Valley and everything else. You start to see a few startup ecosystems really rising to the level of Silicon Valley. It's
interesting that you say that, and I'm going to come to my next question, because you've been really focusing on India and China as markets. What is it about the Indian market that excites you? Is it the scale? Is it the scope of what you can do there? And in terms of daily rides and revenues, where does India really stand for Uber? I know you're expanding there at a very fast pace. Everybody I know is Ubering it all the time, like we call it. But in terms of numbers and revenues.
Well, look, I think the way we look at what we do is Uber is about serving cities. And really what that's about is that's serving people in the cities. And there's hundreds of millions, over 1 billion people that need better transportation in India.
That's right.
And so for us, it's an obvious step for us to go to India and roll out in various cities and put our heart and soul into making that transportation as good as possible and help alternatives flourish. So it's obvious for us. It is not even in a question. It's really like just excitement for us. In terms of dollars and size and things like that, India is our third largest country, behind U.S. and China. And it's growing pretty fast. And so, at the end of the day, it's really going to be U.S., India, and China that are our three biggest markets. And just sheer number of people over time, it could be that India actually surpasses one or both of them.
Oh my God, that's a big bet that you're willing to take on India. With the $1 billion investment that you announced sometime back,
sure.
I'm interested to know where is that being spent, and also, as far as India is concerned, you're still very concentrated in the metro, so to say. You're still in the tier 1 cities. There is a lot of opportunity, I would believe, in tier 2 as well. Is that not something that's exciting you right now?
Well, I
so
think
investments and opportunities.
Well, I think in many ways you almost answered the question, right? So being in the top tier cities in India doesn't mean you're serving India. It means you're serving a portion of it.
That's right. Yes.
And there's so many hundreds of cities to go to, and I think that's how we look at it. And so if you're going to go to hundreds of cities in India, you must bring a large amount of investment capital to make it a reality. You can't just talk about being in those cities. You have to be there. You have to be there with the ability for anybody to have a smartphone, push a button, and get a ride.
That's right.
And it means get a really nice ride or get the cheapest ride possible in your city. And providing that optionality also is important. So, look, when you're going to hundreds of cities in India, you have to bring your checkbook, and that's okay by us. We believe in our model. We believe in the ultimate profitability of it in India, and so therefore just super excited about the expansion.
What sort of localization will we see for an Indian market as far as Uber is concerned?
Well, look, I think there are a number of differences. In India, right? So you see differences in payments, you see differences in how social networks work.
That's right.
You see differences in vehicle financing and how to get, because there's the driver side of the equation, and you need to make sure that they're able to get cars and use cars to make a living. So I think really there's a lot of differences on the finance side, and a lot of differences in just how society works and how that relates to social networks going digital, sort of offline to online.
A very quick question also comes to my mind as far as India is concerned is your arch rival Ola there.
Yeah.
They're doing a fantastic job as well. Some people would want to call it a copycat of Uber. How do you see competition gear up in India? Do you believe they're innovative enough? Does competition there kind of bother you at all, because this is your big bet?
Look, I mean, it's true that we started this sector, but at the end of the day, whether somebody's copying your features or whatnot, really what it's about is it's about how you serve your customers. It's about the product, the technology. At the end of the day, can you provide a reliable ride at the push of a button?
That's right.
That's the most cost effective it possibly can be. And can you continue to innovate in new kinds of products? And so look, every day we don't rest on our laurels because we were here first. Every day we say, what can we do to innovate, to make the experience better, to make it more convenient, to make it cheaper? And to bring a little bit of magic to every experience that people have on it.
There's an obvious question that follows up. I mean, your arch rival in China, that's Didi Kuwadi, is looking to perhaps buy a stake in Ola, and because they have a common investor in SoftBank, does coming together of the Asian companies worry Travis at all?
Look, so first part is competition makes us better, like it just does, and our engineers are working really hard to make sure we continue to deliver a great experience, but that experience gets better. In terms of competitors investing in other ones, I mean, that's not really what we do, but it doesn't bother us that happens. At the end of the day, you've got to be in the cities providing a great service, and that's ultimately what wins. Where the money flows from one company to another is not as important as the reliability, the affordability, and again, that little bit of magic you can add to every experience. And the continued innovation to increase expectations over time.
Just from a regulatory environment point of view, how do the two markets really compare?
Well, look, I think there are interesting regulatory differences, not just between China and India, but really between, there are unique regulatory environments in each of those countries independently. And so that means you just need to learn the local market. You need to be local, and being local really matters. So for India, the areas that we spend time thinking about is really in finance, right? So on the rider side, we need to, we really love for folks to be able to use credit cards or debit cards, maybe like a threshold where I can make a small transaction without having to punch in the code after. For small transactions, we think that's reasonable. It makes a lot of sense on an Uber system because we don't know what the charge is until the ride is done.
That's right, yes.
And so the way it works right now is like when you open your app, the next time around, you're typing in your code for the last trip.
True.
And so we'd love to have a threshold where that's not necessary, right? On the driver side, it's really about how can we find ways for more Indians to build their own business, including owning a car, right? That's, in the United States, we talk about the American dream, but there's an Indian dream, and ownership and being their own boss and running their own business is important, and it's a point of pride and integrity and a way to, I guess maybe it's pride and dignity, and any way that we can sort of help the average Indian who maybe is looking for a new way to make a living or a better way to make a living, get a car and get on Uber, of course, is great, and serve their city, help people get around their city in a really efficient way.
There are some people who are already beginning to quit their jobs and get to the Uber app and start making a living out of there. Very recently, and if my memory doesn't fail me, I think this is about 2 weeks back, Anand Mahindra, who actually makes the big buses and the trucks and the SUVs in India, he did say that companies like Uber and Ola are real threats as far as the buying pattern of people is concerned, because they're just so convenient. The auto industry needs to brace up against this threat. How real are his concerns? Do you look at taking away a pie of that market?
Look, I think, first, I'm not up to speed on his specific concerns, but what you said, look, we look at Uber a couple different ways. One is it makes transportation in cities much more efficient.
Right.
In cities that have tens of millions of people, which a lot of Indian cities do, this is not the only option. It can't be the only option, but it is an option, and a very efficient one. And if we can do our part in helping make cities more efficient, that's great. But honestly, I think, I've been on a number of buses in India, and I think they're going to be packed for some time into the future.
Oh my God, they're overloaded, they're bursting at the seams, so to say. But very quickly, before I move on to really the larger picture that the world is seeing and where you see the journey go, the Delhi incident, what kind of, it's always easy to judge things on hindsight because, you have the advantage of hindsight, which you don't when you're kind of going through a crisis. What kind of lessons in leadership did you learn then? What did this really throw up? Are you much better prepared to, handle that sort of a situation today?
Well, look, I think any safety incident anywhere in the world, we take incredibly seriously. The Delhi incident, that's just heartbreaking.
Yeah.
And so for us, it goes back to the core principles of the company we're building and the service we're trying to offer to riders, which is it's something that every day we work incredibly hard to make it safer. Safer today than yesterday, and working to say what are the ways in which we can make it even safer tomorrow. And that starts before the trip, background checks, and other ways to filter to make sure the right drivers are getting in the cars. But then there's also the trip itself, and making sure we're giving customers the opportunity to give us feedback, give us good information about how a driver is doing, whether he's unsafe or running through red lights or who knows what. And then there's after the fact as well. And so we look at safety as before, during, and after. And there's a lot of technology that we bring to the table to help make these rides safer.
That's right.
And so our job is to make this the safest way to get from point A to point B, and we are working every day to make that happen. And I think our customers, in large part, they do feel that, right? So because you can see, the picture of the driver and you can see the license plate, you can wait indoors without having to go flag down an auto or what have you, because you can send a message, have a message sent to your friends and family that you're in a trip.
That's right.
Like you can have the comfort to know that
where are you at any given
they're
time?
watching too.
Yeah,
True. And at the end of the day, there's just a whole bunch of information that Uber has and that helps to make that ride safer.
Is India a frustrating market also, given the regulatory flip-flops that happen all the time, you having to fight in courts to get Uber back in some cities? Is that an experience that you share across the world? You're in 61 countries now. Or is India particularly frustrating at that level? It is for a lot of people.
Well, look, I don't feel that India has been particularly frustrating compared to other places in the world. We have to understand that the kind of technology and the kind of opportunity that Uber brings, there's a huge upside for cities, but it also means changing the way things work in that city as it relates to incumbents and the older forms of transportation getting around.
That's right.
And so this is the natural order of things. To be honest, we feel that India in many ways has been open to this kind of innovation and this kind of technology, and it's why we exist in so many of India's great cities.
I want to talk about the kind of discontent Uber has created amongst taxi companies. Almost anywhere in the world, they're up in arms. From a consumer point of view, yes, he's being spoiled for choice, and you'd want a safer ride. How do you think this kind of a confrontation is going to get resolved, if at all it will?
Well, look, I'm a believer that that technology that makes people's lives better ultimately wins out, right?
That's true.
And it's going to be it's going to take time, and there's sort of ways that cities and sort of political systems in cities sort of deal with this, and that's different in different countries and in different states and different countries around the world. And so, every city's got its way, but at the end of the day, this is making riders' lives far better, and it's making drivers' lives far better. So I'm an optimist in this regard, and I think ultimately this kind of technology will win out. Now, there's interesting examples from the past, and by the way, India is does not have exclusive privilege on interesting regulatory rules, right?
That's right.
So in the United States, when cars first came out, it was a rule that a person with a flag had to be waving these flags and walking in front of the car, and the car could not pass the person.
Oh my God.
This was a way for the existing horse and carriage industry to keep the cars from disrupting them. Now, eventually the cars won out,
yes.
and the horses now can hang out in pastures and eat grass and be much more comfortable.
Yes.
But I guess I look at things in a similar way, which is this is a new kind of technology. Change can be disruptive, but it's ultimately a good thing, and it ultimately will win out. It's a matter of time, but also there's a way to do it. We partner with city governments, even national governments, to figure out, okay, what are the ways in which we can do this in your cities? And we have those conversations going with folks around the world.
Travis, I have a personal question to ask of you. As the founder of one of the most valued startups in history, but also perhaps one of the most controversial ones, how do you cope with criticism? I mean, how would you cope with the criticism, and how do you motivate yourself when Silicon Valley veterans like Peter Thiel say that, the company that you founded, Uber, is ethically challenged? Does that trouble you? Does that bother you?
Well, look, when you bring big change to cities, to systems, to existing incumbents, you have to expect a certain amount of criticism, and not just a certain amount. You have to expect a lot. It's just part of what you sign up for when you do a disruption or a disruptive startup. But that said look, it's not easy. And so what you do is you say, look, I'm going to make sure that every action I take is principled, that have principles behind it that I believe in, and that the company at large can believe in. Remember, we are almost 5,000 employees.
That's right.
And that means that, I mean, as a company, we all have to believe in the actions we take because we all wake up in the morning and we need to feel good about the things we do. And so we make sure principles are underpinning every action we take. And then look, sometimes you make mistakes, whatever they happen to be, and you need to be quick at identifying and owning the things that you could have done better, and then figuring out, hey, how do we make sure that we don't make that mistake
So you're really somebody who takes criticism in their stride and perhaps gets optimism out of this. You know, in some sense, it's rather interesting that you've almost, you've almost spawned a culture of Uberification. A very cool startup in one space wants to call it the Uber of that space, or the Uber of this space. Just by doing that, do they stand a better chance of being funded by Travis Kalanick at the end of the day?
Look,
is it flattering?
Look, I think it's fine. I think a lot of the Uber of X things really will stand on their own. It's. I think sometimes people misuse that a little bit, but yeah, it's flattering. I mean, I'm fine with it. It doesn't bother me. Some of the Uber of X things are things we do, but most of them are things that stand on their own. And I'm as a technologist, love to see those things flourish.
You know, the other thing that's very interesting as far as Uber and yourself and your own personal journey is concerned, and this brings me to my last question really, is that your home is really a jam pad of sorts as far as startups and entrepreneurs is concerned. Many of them, you throw your doors open for people to come, brainstorm, exchange ideas freely there. When do we see a similar jam pad happen in India? Is that anywhere on your radar? I
mean, look, you know, like I said earlier, right, you know, I view what's happening in Bangalore and other cities in India. I see a bubbling startup community happening. You know, at some point, you know, and not just some point, I'm spending more and more time in India and in China.
That's right.
So, you know, maybe I can have an ad hoc jam pad or ad hoc jam. But, you know, look, what it's about is it's about people with ideas. You know, that the term jam is a term that's used by jazz musicians.
That's right, yes.
Which is an ad hoc improvisation around music. Now, when you do it with ideas and you do it with entrepreneurs, then it's about what's next. And it could be solving any kind of problem. It could be, hey, look, I'm trying to get funded and I don't know how to. Or it could be, I need to make my first sale. Or it could be, I'm trying to solve a very difficult technical problem. But entrepreneuring and building businesses is so much about creative problem solving. And so instead of playing music, we are sort of interacting in an ad hoc way about ideas and about solving the problems that are between the idea and making it a reality.
That's right. I have a last question to ask of you. You know, food delivery in 10 minutes in New York and super cool things like that. Which are the other user interesting cases that you would want to pioneer, and is local commerce the natural extension for Uber?
Well, look, you know, the business that you could say we are in is we deliver cars in 5 minutes. But once you deliver cars in 5 minutes, there's a lot of things you could deliver in 5 minutes.
That's right, that's true.
And so, yes, it does become a local commerce thing, but it becomes a local commerce thing for what is it you want now. It's what you want when you want it. And really, you want to push a button and get it right now. And so that's the business we're in. The things you want right now are a lot of those things Uber's going to be in the business of, I think.
Travis, I want you to answer one frank question for me. Get as candid as you can. 2 years back, in fact 5 years back or 2 years back, did you imagine you're going to be ferrying so many people around the world in an application just at the click of a button? No. Remember, look, when we first started, this was almost a side project. It was for me, my co-founder, and our 100 friends. That's right.
And it was really hard to get around this city, San Francisco. Not enough taxis, not enough ways to get around, not enough parking, and we just want to push a button and get a ride. And that's how it started. And you could never have expected this kind of growth. But the way we do it is just every day we try to make everything a little bit better. We try to serve customers a little bit better. We try to help drivers make a little bit better living. And every day when you get a little bit better over time, and you do that for 5 years straight, in a market that needs alternatives and needs good solutions for getting around. Well, there's a lot of hard work. There's also a little bit of luck, and that's kind of, you know, being an entrepreneur that's seen a lot of different things.
That's right.
There's no way you could predict what we've seen.
Travis, it's an absolute honor and pleasure to be speaking to you.
Good
Such a pleasure.
to speak to you
the
too.
next time you actually click on that app and you want to be Ubered around the world, this is the man right behind it.
Find us on Facebook at facebook.com/ETNow and don't forget to click the like button. You can also follow us on Twitter at ETNowLive. To stay updated with all our programming, hit the subscribe button on our YouTube channel by logging on to youtube.com/user/ETNow.